All right, let's dive in. Jan Martel's Life of Pi. We're going deep on this one, exploring all the layers of meaning and really trying to grasp why it continues to resonate with readers even all these years later.
I think one of the most captivating things about this book is how it goes beyond just a survival story. It grapples with some really profound questions about faith and the power of storytelling
Mm.
and what we hold on to when faced with the unimaginable.
Yeah, definitely. So for anyone needing a refresher, we've got Pai Patel, a young boy on a ship with his family heading from India to Canada.
Hmm.
And then disaster. The ship sinks, leaving Pi the sole human survivor on a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker. But this isn't where the story really begins, right?
Right, it all starts much earlier.
Mm.
Pai's childhood in Pondicherry, India is key to understanding him. Growing up around all those exotic animals in his family's zoo, that definitely shapes his worldview, seeing both the beauty and the danger in the world.
Absolutely. And there's this tension throughout his childhood between belief and logic. Pi's drawn to religion, exploring Hinduism, Christianity, Islam. It's like he's searching for meaning, something to believe in.
Yeah.
But his father, the practical zookeeper, constantly emphasizes reason and observing the natural world.
It's like he's being pulled in two different directions.
Exactly.
And then comes a turning point.
Mhm.
The family decides to emigrate to Canada, selling the zoo animals and boarding that Japanese cargo ship,
Yui.
Sinsum. What do you think? Does this decision to leave everything they know behind foreshadow the upheaval that's about to hit them?
I think so. There's that sense of the unknown. Like heading into the vast, unpredictable ocean mirrors their journey. And, well, we know what happens next. The Simpsons sinks, completely turning Pi's world upside down. What do you think Martel's aiming for, putting Pi in such an extreme situation?
I think it's about stripping away everything familiar, all those comforts and structures of everyday life, forcing Pi to confront his instincts.
Mm.
It's pure survival mode. And in that fight, the lines between faith and reason, between the civilized world and the wild, those lines blur.
Absolutely. And then we meet the lifeboat's inhabitants. Richard Parker, the tiger, front and center. But there's also a hyena, a zebra that's been injured, and Orange Juice, the orangutan. It takes on this almost surreal, allegorical feeling, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. This odd group, it becomes a microcosm of the world. You've got the hierarchy, the struggles for dominance, and in the end, just the brutal reality of nature. I almost see it as Martel setting the stage to examine the darker sides of human nature, even if it's playing out through these animals.
Yeah, I see that. And the hyena, it really embodies that darkness, acting on pure instinct, killing both the zebra and Orange Juice. And those scenes, they're pretty graphic. It's a stark reminder of the savagery that comes out in a fight for survival.
That's true. But it's interesting how Pi, a lifelong vegetarian, is at first so repulsed by the idea of eating meat. He's clinging to his morals even when his life's on the line.
It's a powerful way to show how extreme situations challenge those deep-seated values we hold. Do you think that internal conflict is something that resonates with readers? This idea that we might be capable of things we never thought we'd do when pushed to our limits?
Absolutely. I think it makes you wonder, how would I react in that situation? Would I hold on to my beliefs? Would survival instinct take over? It definitely makes you think.
And then there's Richard Parker. He represents this formidable, unpredictable force that Pi has to deal with. Sharing a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger, it's almost impossible to imagine. How does he even begin to handle that?
It shows his adaptability, his ingenuity. Pi realizes he can't fight Richard Parker directly, so he starts by creating a separate space for himself,
Yeah.
a makeshift raft attached to the lifeboat,
Oh, great.
using his knowledge of animals and what's available to him to establish some kind of boundary.
He's drawing on that understanding of territory and dominance from his childhood at the zoo. But it's not just physical, is it? Pi also has to assert himself psychologically to coexist with this predator.
Exactly. He uses a whistle and carefully portions out the food, establishing a routine to remind Richard Parker who's in control,
Wow.
at least to a certain degree. I mean, it's incredibly resourceful and brave. And I think it raises questions about our own resilience when we're faced with these seemingly impossible challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And this relationship between Pi and Richard Parker, that becomes the core of the story.
Yeah.
This balance of power, a partnership born out of necessity in this extreme survival situation. But the ocean itself is also a powerful force shaping his experience, wouldn't you say? Its vastness, indifference, its ability to be both beautiful and destructive.
Yeah.
It's almost like a character in its own right.
It definitely is. A constant reminder of how unpredictable life can be,
Yeah.
of forces beyond our control. Pi is at the mercy of the ocean, subject to its whims. That vulnerability being adrift in this massive expanse, it really seeps into the whole story.
It's amazing how Martel uses the ocean to mirror Pi's internal journey. The storms, the calm periods, the moments of despair, and those glimpses of hope, it all reflects his emotional state. And then there's this unexpected turn when Pi comes across that mysterious floating island.
Yes, at first it seems like paradise.
Right. Lush, fresh water, all these meerkats.
But as Pi explores more, he uncovers a darker side to this utopia.
Hmm.
The island provides food during the day, but when night falls, it becomes a trap.
Like a classic case of too good to be true. What do you make of this island? It seems so symbolic.
It's definitely open to interpretation, but I think one way to see it is as false hope. It gives Pi that sense of security, a break from the lifeboat.
Right.
But it's temporary, an illusion, and that connects to a bigger theme throughout the book, the cyclical nature of life and death, that ebb and flow of hope and despair that Pi keeps navigating.
That's a great point. It reminds us that even in desperate situations, we can be lured in by that idea of safety. And in the end, Pi has to leave the island, choose to continue his journey, even though it means facing the uncertainty of the open ocean again.
A decision that shows his resilience, his refusal to give up, even when there's a seemingly easy way out. And I think that choice sets the stage for the next part of his ordeal, one that'll test him in ways he couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, and that journey, it brings him to land. Relief after 227 days at sea. But like you said, it's not a simple happy ending, is it?
Not at all. Can you imagine going from that isolation, that almost primal existence, straight back into human society? It must have been a shock to his system. And then there's the whole issue of his story.
Right. When Pi tells the Japanese officials about what happened, they have a hard time believing him.
Yeah.
I mean, a boy and a tiger, a hyena, an orangutan, all on a lifeboat. It sounds unbelievable, almost mythical.
It is, isn't it? How we gravitate toward those rational explanations, even when something extraordinary happens. It's like we're wired to dismiss anything that doesn't fit. We need order, a story that makes sense within what we think is possible. So faced with their disbelief, Pi gives them a second story, a different version.
And this is where Martel throws us a curveball. Instead of animals, it's humans on that lifeboat. Characters mirroring the roles of the animals. There's a sailor with a broken leg representing the zebra, a cook who's really cruel, embodying the hyena, and Pi's own mother, a symbol of love, protection. She becomes orange juice.
It's so different, much darker and brutal. And what's brilliant, Pi doesn't say which story is true. He leaves it completely open, forcing us to think about what is truth? What is storytelling?
It's like he's asking, which one do you choose to believe and why? I mean, was that his intention all along, leaving us with that uncertainty?
Oh, absolutely. It's deliberate. He's challenging what we assume is true.
Yeah.
Do we go with a story that fits our own ideas of reality? Or are we open to the idea that truth is subjective, shaped by our individual perceptions, our experiences?
Multiple truths existing at the same time, it makes you think. And it brings up the power of stories themselves. Why does the animal version stick with readers, even if it's maybe less factual?
I think it taps into this need we have for narratives that help us understand the world, especially when faced with chaos, with suffering. The animal story, with its fantastical elements, it lets us explore these really deep themes in a way that's both captivating and emotional. It offers a metaphorical truth that goes beyond just the facts.
So it's like a deeper, more symbolic way of understanding what Pi went through.
Yeah.
And speaking of symbols, we have to talk about Richard Parker. He's more than just a tiger, isn't he?
Right, he's so complex, multi-layered. Is he Pi's primal self, his fear, strength? Maybe all of those. That's what makes him so interesting, open to interpretation.
Almost like he embodies the wildness of life, the unpredictable, something Pi has to face head-on and eventually learn to live with. And that brings us to some of the bigger themes woven through Life of Pi. We've got truth, storytelling. What about survival and human instinct?
We see Pi, a vegetarian his whole life, having to eat fish, even turtles, just to stay alive. He has to overcome these deep-seated beliefs about the sanctity of life, just to survive. It makes you question the compromises we make in extreme situations, what lines we might cross when our very existence is at stake.
It pushes us to really examine how our own values might shift when we're stripped down to the bare essentials, to our instincts. And what about faith and reason? We see Pi finding strength in his beliefs, even while going through this incredibly real, harsh situation.
Yeah, it's fascinating how they're intertwined. His faith gives him solace, but he's also using his intellect, his problem-solving, to navigate those physical challenges of survival. Do you think Martel's implying that faith and reason aren't in conflict, that they can actually coexist, even support each other?
I think he's definitely exploring that. Pi's story suggests that faith can give us a framework for meaning, to cope with the things we just can't comprehend.
Mm.
But reason, logic, those are crucial too, for dealing with the world around us. Like he's finding a balance between those two forces.
And you can see that balance in his relationship with Richard Parker, right? He accepts the tiger, but also finds ways to impose order, to create boundaries, to coexist without being destroyed. It's this careful dance between acceptance and taking action, between surrendering to forces beyond our control and finding a way to assert our own will to survive.
That's a great point. And it brings to mind the role of the ocean. We've discussed its vastness, indifference, but it's also life-giving. It both threatens and sustains him.
It's a metaphor for life itself, isn't it? Beauty and terror, nourishment and danger. Pi has to learn to navigate it, to adapt to its changing moods.
It's like constantly adjusting to it, figuring out how to work with its power, but also respecting its danger. And that adaptation, being in flux, that becomes a key part of his journey.
A journey that eventually leads him back to civilization, to a world that must feel so strange after what he's been through. But the question remains, what did he learn? What truths did he uncover? And how will they shape him going forward?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how those 227 days at sea, facing those incredible challenges, could not change him. I wonder if he even recognizes himself when he gets back to land.
It's like he's gone through this total transformation, like shedding his old self.
Right.
And that brings up this question, what does it even mean to go back to normal after something so life-altering?
Makes me think of soldiers coming home from war. They've seen things, been through things that are just unfathomable to most of us. How do you bridge that gap, that difference in experience, going back to a world that's just continued on without you?
Trying to reconcile those two realities, the one you lived and the one everyone else is in, it's tough. And it makes me think about those two stories Pi tells. What if they're not so separate? Maybe they're both true, in a way, just reflecting different parts of what he experienced.
That's interesting. The animal story captures that almost mythical aspect of his journey, the visceral feeling of it. While the human story, that goes into the gritty reality, the psychological impact of survival. Maybe by putting them together, he's trying to process the incomprehensible.
Exactly. Like he's saying, here's the story that will capture your imagination, make you feel what I felt. But then he gives us that other story, darker, unsettling. Maybe that shows the deeper scars, the ones you can't see.
Yeah, and Martel doesn't avoid that darkness, does he? He doesn't give us a neat ending, a simple triumph of the human spirit kind of thing. Instead, we're left with the ambiguity, those lingering questions about truth, about what it costs to survive.
And that's part of why this book stays with you, I think. It doesn't shy away from how complex the human experience really is. The darkness, the doubt, the struggle to balance faith and reason, that brutal need to survive.
Absolutely. It sticks with you. Makes you think about your own beliefs, your own values, even the stories you tell yourself about the world.
I think that's what Martel ultimately wants us to walk away with. A sense of wonder, a willingness to be open to the unknown, and the understanding that truth, well, it could be many things, subjective, hard to pin down.
It's a reminder that the stories we choose to believe, those shape our reality. And sometimes it's the fantastical ones, the ones that seem impossible, that hold the most truth. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Life of Pi, I want to leave you with this. What stories do you tell yourself, and which ones do you choose to believe?